Me Season 1, Episode 1, The Whisper Beneath the Floorboards. The rain fell hard on Columbus, Ohio. The streets glistened like black glass under the humming streetlights, a city breathing beneath a shroud of secrets. Somewhere in the night, a woman screamed. Detective Roosevelt Burke pulled his collar up against the cold, stepping out of his unmarked cruiser, his boots sinking into the wet curbside muck. The house before him, what was left of it, stood under the pulsing blue and red strobes like a witness too frightened to speak. Yellow tape flapped in the wind, slicing the air like warning. "Burke," said a young officer, her voice tight. "It's bad, real bad." Roosevelt nodded once. He'd seen it all before, hadn't he? Or at least, he told himself he had. But as he crossed the threshold and the smell hit him, copper, rot, and something floral, almost sweet, he knew this was different. The body lay in the center of the room like an offering. Arms stretched wide, palms turned upward, eyes open, a white rose petal resting gently on the tip of her tongue. "He left another one," murmured the coroner, already pale beneath the fluorescence. This was the third. No forced entry, no fingerprints, no signs of struggle, just a message. Burke stared down at her, the young woman no older than 25, her face peaceful, as though she'd been chosen. A part of him recoiled, but another part, a part he buried beneath layers of duty and instinct, felt something else. Not joy, not satisfaction, familiarity. He turned quickly, suppressing a shiver. "Who found her?" "Neighbor. Said she heard music. Classical. Chopin, maybe. Said it drifted through the floor like whispers." Burke wrote that down. His handwriting, always neat, trembled tonight. Chase Langford adjusted her badge as she stepped into the precinct the next morning. New to the department, she carried the weight of her lineage like a second uniform. Her grandfather, a decorated officer, her father, a local legend who took down the Worthington bank crew with nothing but his Glock and a beer bottle, and now her. Third generation, hungry, determined, sharp as cut glass. "Langford," the captain barked. "You're with Burke." She blinked. "The Roosevelt Burke? Don't fan out. He's brilliant, but off. You'll see. He doesn't like partners. You stick with him." She found him outside the morgue, staring at the toe tag of the latest victim, as though the numbers whispered secrets only he could hear. "Detective Burke? I'm Langford, partner." He didn't look at her, just nodded. "Another one last night. No signs of entry, nothing touched. It's like the killer floated in and out." "The rose petal. Any meaning?" "Symbolic, ritualistic, but not religious, personal." "He's escalating," Chase said. Burke turned to her slowly. "Or, we're only just catching up." Me. Season 1, Episode 2, The Sleepwalker. The next body was found hanging from a pedestrian bridge near German Village. Dawn again. Always dawn. A jogger spotted the silhouette against the morning mist, still graceful, suspended like part of the skyline. The victim was a woman in her 20s. Name Jada Klein, freelance artist. Fingers stained with charcoal. A lily tied in her hair, lips red as if painted seconds ago. The knot in the rope was clean. Too clean. Roosevelt studied the body without blinking. Chase noticed his breathing, slow and shallow as if he were underwater. "Third body in 2 weeks," she said. "We're missing something." Roosevelt rubbed his temples. "We're missing him." "You all right, Burke?" He didn't answer. Later that day, Chase found Roosevelt in the records room, surrounded by boxes. Old case files, crime scene photos, journals from past victims of unrelated murders, or so it seemed. "You're looking for patterns," she said, stepping closer. "I'm looking for someone I already know." Chase tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "Nothing. Never mind." But it did mean something. Roosevelt had started hearing voices, low murmurs in his sleep. He'd found red lipstick in his coat pocket. His nails bore crescent-shaped dirt. He couldn't remember when he started biting them. The next night, Roosevelt was found sleepwalking down Broad Street by a patrol unit, barefoot, eyes open, whispering names. They brought him in. He claimed exhaustion. Dr. Hendricks saw him again. He told her about the sleepwalking, not the lipstick, not the voice that sometimes spoke when he was shaving. "Let me out." Meanwhile, Chase followed a lead, a man named Franklin DuPont, who claimed he saw someone by the river 2 nights before the first body surfaced. Said the man was tall, silent, wearing a black coat and gloves. "Could you ID him?" she asked. Franklin hesitated. "No, but I remember the eyes, dead calm, like he wasn't looking at the river, like he was listening to it." That night, Chase dreamed of lilies. By week's end, a 4th body appeared. Same signs. This one had a note pinned to the chest with a safety pin. 5 words typed on old paper. I see you in me. Chase looked up from the note. Roosevelt was staring at it, unmoving. What do you think it means? She asked. He answered too quickly. A signature. But he was pale, because deep inside Roosevelt Burke, something moved, stirred, smiled, and for just a moment, the sound of water echoed in his mind like applause. End of episode 2. Me. Season 1, episode 3, A Room Full of Eyes. There was something wrong with the way the air felt that morning. It wasn't just the 5th body, though that should have been enough. It was the fact that it was left in front of the police station, neatly laid out, face up, centered on the front steps, as if it had walked there on its own. This time, it was a man, middle-aged, construction worker, muscular, rope burns along his ankles, wrists bound like the rest. But there was something new. His eyes were gone, replaced by polished river stones, and the lily crushed in his hand. Roosevelt arrived late, again, his shirt wrinkled, a bead of sweat on his temple even though the morning was cold. Rough night? Chase asked. Didn't sleep. He stepped past her without meeting her gaze. The crime scene buzzed with tension, cameras flashed, officers muttered theories. Chase examined the body, trying to ignore the feeling of something watching her. The eyes, those stones, were perfectly placed, not shoved, set, almost lovingly. This is an escalation, she said aloud. Roosevelt crouched by the body. This one was angry. You think it's personal? He didn't answer. Dr. Hendricks pressed a pencil between her fingers during Roosevelt's session. How many nights have you been blacking out? 3, maybe 4. I wake up in my car or my bathtub. Do you feel threatened by yourself? He laughed, a short, bitter sound. I feel like I'm being followed. She leaned in. You are, by yourself. He didn't laugh that time. Later, Chase discovered something that didn't sit right. In the reports from the first 2 bodies, the knots were double-looped, uncommon, a specific kind of boating knot, the kind her father, a Navy vet, used to teach her when she was 10. So she checked. The 3rd body, same knot. The 4th, again. Now the 5th, only this time, the loop was imperfect, a single slip, which meant one of 2 things. The killer changed, or someone tried to copy the killer's work. She looked over at Roosevelt, sitting in silence at his desk, staring at the wall like it owed him answers. Burke, she said, approaching slowly. Did you notice the knot on the last body? No. You used to do boat patrol back in '09, right? Briefly. You ever tie a double loop hitch? He turned toward her, too calm. I don't remember. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her walls felt too thin, the night too quiet. She dreamt of eyes, hundreds of them, lining the walls of a dark room, watching her, whispering her name. She woke up at 3:13 a.m. There was mud on her bedroom floor and a white lily on her pillow. She reported it. Roosevelt said all the right things. We'll check cameras, we'll sweep for prints, we'll keep you protected. But the way he said it chilled her more than the message, like he wasn't surprised. By Friday, the 6th body appeared in the campus arboretum. Another woman, mid-40s, professor of psychology. This time her mouth was sewn shut with fishing wire, and inside her coat pocket, a photograph of Roosevelt Burke from his academy graduation. Smiling, shaved, younger, but unmistakably him. Someone was playing with them now, someone close. But Chase said nothing. She held the photo tightly, her hand trembling, and looked over at her partner, his face blank, watching the wind move the trees. Because for the first time since she joined the force, she was afraid of him. Me, Season 1, Episode 4, The Blackout Diary. The rain had a voice that night. Not a whisper, not a scream, something in between. Like someone crying under their breath, just loud enough for you to hear, but not loud enough to help. A 7th body was found in the alley behind a shuttered movie theater on Parsons Avenue. Male, 28, aspiring filmmaker, last seen leaving a local indie film festival. Same red lips, same bound wrists, a lily resting between his folded hands like a benediction. But this time there was something else, a clue, a diary, soaked through but legible, tucked into the victim's messenger bag. Pages torn, some ink smeared. But the last entry was clear. He spoke to me last night, said I wasn't really here, that none of us were, that we're all part of him. He told me the river wasn't a place, it was a door. Roosevelt read the entry 3 times in silence. His hands shook, but not from fear. The words felt like something he had once written or dreamed. like echoes from a place his mind refused to remember. Schizophrenic rambling, he muttered aloud. Maybe the victim had an episode. Chase didn't respond. She was too focused on Roosevelt's eyes. He wasn't reading the words like a detective. He was remembering them. Later that day, she checked the precinct logs. Roosevelt had signed out for 2 hours the previous evening. No case assigned. No log of where he went. When she asked, he shrugged. Needed air. Been getting headaches. That night, Roosevelt had another blackout. He woke up in his apartment bathtub, fully clothed, water cold, red lipstick smeared across his collar, a lily floating near the drain. His phone was missing. His hands were pruned and shaking. A faint scratch ran along his cheek, like fingernails had raked him. He threw out his clothes, cleaned the tub, sat in his kitchen with the lights off until morning. Then he found the notebook, hidden in the back of his closet, bound in cracked leather. Pages filled in handwriting that was unmistakably his, except he had no memory of writing it. Each entry began the same way, "For the moments I am not me." Inside were vivid descriptions of the victims, details never released to the public, thoughts, plans, doubts. The most recent entry read, "She's starting to see me. The girl, Chase. Her eyes are too sharp. I can feel her breath on my neck when I sleep. I think she suspects." Roosevelt dropped the notebook like it burned him, sat on the floor, began laughing, just softly, just a little, because there was no way this was real. Was there? Meanwhile, Chase followed a new theory. The victims weren't just random. They were each connected to therapy groups, survivors, dreamers, people rebuilding themselves, people who'd tried to erase trauma. What if the killer wasn't targeting weakness but rebirth, killing people who were learning to live again? The theory was thin, but the evidence wasn't. A city therapist named Dr. Leone had seen 4 of the 7 victims. Her address was an old brick building near Franklin Park. Chase went alone. Dr. Leone welcomed her with tea and tremors. "I told them someone was watching. I felt it. Every time a session ended, every time I walked to my car." "Did you report it?" "I didn't know who to trust, but there was a man. He came to see me once, said he couldn't sleep, that he lost time, that he felt watched." "Do you remember his name?" "No," she whispered, "but I remember his voice. It was hollow, like an echo of something that didn't belong." Chase left with a cold pit in her stomach. Back at the station, Roosevelt sat alone in the dark, staring at his reflection in the black screen of his computer monitor. His face looked unfamiliar in shadow, longer, leaner. There was something behind his eyes, a flicker, a grin. He looked away. That evening, another note was delivered, this time to Chase's home address, slid under her door. No envelope, just a folded paper typed on the same old machine. "I know your shadow. It doesn't belong to you." Chase didn't sleep that night. She stayed in her kitchen with her back against the wall, a knife on the table, and outside her window, a silhouette stood in the rain for exactly 6 minutes before walking away. End of episode 4. Me, Season 1, Episode 5, The Man in the Static Columbus, was quieter than usual. It wasn't that the city had changed, it was the people. Fear began curling around corners like fog, thick and sour. The Lily Man had claimed 7 lives, each death more intimate, more symbolic than the last. And now, someone had delivered a note to a detective's private home. The department was on edge. But Roosevelt Burke, he wasn't afraid, he was tired. He stared at the old notebook on his kitchen table, its cover warped from steam, the ink starting to bleed into the paper like veins. He hadn't touched it since that night, couldn't bring himself to. But every time he tried to throw it away, something inside him screamed. It didn't belong to him. It belonged to the other. At the precinct, Chase hadn't mentioned the note. Not yet. She watched Roosevelt more carefully now, how he hesitated before answering simple questions, how he sometimes flinched when his own name was called. She couldn't explain it, but something in her gut said don't ask him yet. So instead, she went back to the alley where the 7th body was found. There, she met a local electrician named Darnell, who'd been fixing a blown transformer nearby that night. "I saw someone," he said. "Real late, couldn't see his face. Hood up, just standing there." Standing where? Over the body, just watching it, like he was waiting for it to wake up. Chase's blood turned to glass. "Could you describe his build?" "Tall, maybe 6'2", broad shoulders, didn't move like a junkie, moved like a cop." That night, Roosevelt had the dream again. He stood at the edge of the river. Not a sound in the world, just moonlight and water. Behind him, the voices rose like wind through reeds. We were never different. We were always the same. He turned. Hundreds of bodies lined the riverbank, all staring at him, all with his face. When he woke, the power in his apartment was out. Static buzzed from his TV, unplugged yet humming. He stared into the screen, and for a split second, he saw it, his own reflection, smiling. The next day, Chase was given a lead. Someone had tried to pawn a charm bracelet that belonged to one of the victims. A security camera had caught it, a man in a black hoodie, face hidden, wearing gloves. Roosevelt and Chase drove to the shop together. She watched him grip the steering wheel harder than necessary. "You all right?" she asked. "Fine. You don't look fine." Silence. "Then do you ever forget where you've been?" She turned toward him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, like you're living two lives and one of them's watching the other." She tried to laugh, couldn't. "You need sleep, Burke. Sleep isn't the problem." At the pawn shop, the clerk described the man as quiet, calm, paid in cash, didn't speak unless prompted. Seemed almost... "Do you remember his voice?" Chase asked. The clerk thought, "Yeah, cold, not angry, just detached, like a voicemail from a dead man." Later, Chase reviewed the footage herself. The man's face was hidden, yes, but as she watched him turn to leave, her breath caught in her throat. It was his posture, the limp in his right leg, the same gait she saw every day walking beside Roosevelt Burke. Back at the station, Roosevelt's hands trembled as he reached into his desk drawer. The notebook was missing. He searched his apartment 3 times, his car, his locker, gone. But then when he opened his bottom drawer, he found something else. A lily. Fresh, its stem wet with dew. Meanwhile, Chase returned home to find her apartment door ajar. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, just a Polaroid taped to her bathroom mirror. It showed a man standing in her living room while she slept on the couch. The figure was silhouetted in shadow, face obscured, but his hands, they were Roosevelt's. She stared at the photo for a long time. Then she sat down, and she cried, because she wasn't ready to believe it. Not yet, but something inside her whispered, "You already do." End of episode 5. Me. Season 1, episode 6. The Mirror Test. The rain didn't fall that night. It waited. Like the city itself was holding its breath, tense, trembling, watching a game unfold where no one knew the rules. Chase didn't go to work the next morning. She sat in her apartment, the Polaroid lying on the table beside a loaded Glock. She didn't touch either. She stared at her reflection instead. Not vanity, fear. The kind of fear you feel when you realize the monster might not be in the woods or under the bed or even watching from the dark, but sitting across from you, drinking coffee, cracking dry jokes, calling you partner. Her phone buzzed. "Burke, you okay? You missed roll call." She stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. At the precinct, Roosevelt could feel it, that crawling tension in the air like blood just before a bruise. Chase wasn't answering. She always answered. He found himself pacing the break room, drinking black coffee he didn't remember pouring. His reflection in the vending machine glass looked unfamiliar, too still, too sharp. He didn't recognize his own expression. Then he heard it. Not a sound, not really. A thought, a whisper. "She knows." He gripped the edge of the counter so hard the knuckles split. That afternoon, Chase drove out of the city, south, toward a memory. She pulled up to a small cabin just past Circleville, an old retreat house used by her father and grandfather before him. The kind of place you only visit when the world doesn't make sense and your badge can't protect you from the questions in your chest. Inside the cabin was a locked box under the floorboards. She opened it. Inside, a USB drive marked Internal Affairs, her father's notes, a case he never solved, a file she was never supposed to find. She plugged it into her laptop. Video files, interview footage, police reports, and buried in the middle, grainy footage from 2007, an off-the-books interrogation. A young Roosevelt Burke, hands trembling, sitting in a dimly lit room, eyes wild. "I'm not him," the young Burke whispered into the camera. "He lives inside me. I just watch." Chase's breath froze in her throat. The timestamp showed he'd been a patrol officer then. No charges filed. No record in his personnel file. Her father had buried it. But why? She fast-forwarded. "He only comes when I sleep. Roosevelt muttered in the recording, but he remembers everything. Meanwhile, back in Columbus, Roosevelt was unraveling. He walked the riverbanks again, not to investigate, to listen. The city whispered now. It spoke through still water and rustling leaves, through train horns and alley cats, through dead eyes and lilies that shouldn't bloom in June. He stood over the exact place where the first body was found, looked into the water, saw nothing, but when he blinked, he saw his reflection grinning, and in his hand, in the reflection, was a white lily. He dropped to his knees. A voice in his head whispered, "Let me out. I can finish this." That night, Chase returned to the city. She went straight to Roosevelt's apartment. He wasn't home. She picked the lock. Illegal, yes, but fear doesn't file paperwork. Inside, it was clean. Too clean. Sanitized. Like someone preparing for inspection. But then she noticed the closet. Inside, 3 suits, polished shoes, and on the shelf, a small black leather notebook, not the one he'd lost. This one was new. She flipped it open. Only a single page was filled. The 8th flower belongs to her. Suddenly, a sound. The front door creaked. Roosevelt stepped into the apartment, wet from the rain that had finally started to fall, shadows sliding across his face. They locked eyes. Neither spoke, just silence, tight, thin, like a blade pressed between them. Then he smiled. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said softly. Chase tucked the notebook behind her back. "I could say the same." Lightning flashed behind him, and for a brief moment, just a flicker, she swore she saw something else standing behind his eyes, something waiting. End of episode 6. Season 1, episode 7, A Lily for the Living. The rain didn't stop. For 3 days, Columbus drowned beneath it, sidewalks slick with silence, gutters weeping like the city itself had started grieving. 8 bodies now. The press screamed theories. The public demanded arrests. The department stood paralyzed beneath flashing bulbs and growing doubt. Inside the precinct, Chase Whelan sat in silence, fingers laced, eyes locked on the notebook, now sealed inside an evidence bag on her desk. The 8th flower belongs to her. Her name wasn't written, but she felt it. She was the 8th. She stared at her reflection in the one-way glass of Interrogation Room 2, remembering Roosevelt's voice from the night before. "I didn't know you'd be here." But that smile had ruined her sleep. Roosevelt didn't sleep, not anymore. He wandered the streets beneath the clouds, coat soaked, steps aimless. His badge felt like a curse now, heavy on his belt, dragging his spine downward. Every face on the street looked like a mask. Every mirror told a different story. He'd tried therapy again. Dr. Hendricks had asked if he was still experiencing blackouts. "No," he lied. "Any voices?" He smiled. "Only yours." But the truth scratched beneath his ribs like claws. The voice was stronger now, clearer, closer. "We are not broken," it whispered in the shower. "We are becoming." That evening, a 911 call came through dispatch. Woman screaming, West Side. No address, just a phone dropped on the pavement, still recording. Burke and Chase were assigned the call. They drove in silence. Not the awkward kind, the final kind. Chase stared at him when he wasn't looking, traced the line of his jaw, the tension in his hands. She wanted to believe it wasn't him. She wanted to believe monsters wore masks, not uniforms. But doubt had a heartbeat now, and it pulsed every time he blinked too slow. They arrived at the alley just past Broad and Yale. Nothing but a dumpster and the echo of footsteps. The phone still lay there, screen cracked, camera open. Roosevelt bent to retrieve it. That's when Chase saw the flower, a lily, fresh, untouched by rain, tucked behind the dumpster, deliberate, waiting. Her throat tightened. "You okay?" Roosevelt asked, standing. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just eerie." They drove back with nothing conclusive. No body, no blood, just a phantom scream and a flower. Back at the station, Chase entered her report, then slipped out before anyone could stop her. She had one last card to play. That night, she went to visit her uncle, retired Captain Jonas Whelan. He'd served with Burke's old precinct before the restructuring. She brought bourbon. He brought the ghosts. "Roosevelt Burke," Jonas grunted, lighting a cigarette with shaking fingers. Kid was sharp, too sharp. Quiet, though, walked like he was always somewhere else. "You ever hear anything strange?" Jonas hesitated. "Only thing I remember, back in '07, there was this string of weird break-ins. No theft, just flowers left behind, always lilies, always arranged just so." "No suspect?" He ashed his cigarette, not meeting her gaze. They closed it, but IA had eyes on one of our own, never got a name, buried the case before it got loud. Chase didn't speak. She didn't have to. Jonas looked at her. It's him, isn't it? She stood. I don't know. But her silence had its own gravity. Back in his apartment, Roosevelt stared at the whiteboard. 8 victims, 8 photos, 8 dates. He stared so long the faces blurred, until all of them looked like his own. He whispered to himself, voice trembling, "Did I do this?" No answer, until the lights flickered, twice, and the television turned on by itself. Static, then a video. Footage of the alley from earlier that day, a figure placing the flower, not seen by the responding officers. The footage zoomed in. It was him, clear as day, Roosevelt Burke. Placing the lily, smiling, he dropped to his knees. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." And then the voice said it, calm as scripture. "Now you're watching." Season 1, Episode 8, Pieces of the Man. Morning came like an accusation. Harsh light through cheap blinds, peeling paint, the hum of a city trying to forget itself. Roosevelt Burke sat on the edge of his bed, palms against his temples. The television still buzzing static in the background. The video was gone. No trace on the drive, no folder, no timestamp. He had watched himself commit something he couldn't remember, or worse, something he couldn't deny. He opened the top drawer of his dresser. Inside, between spare keys and prescription bottles, lay a single lily, still fresh. Chase kept her secrets locked away now. In her apartment's coat closet, behind old boxes and winter boots, she'd set up a hidden file board, photos of the victims, the crime scenes, timelines, circled addresses, and in the center, Roosevelt's photo. Each string led back to him, and none of them made her feel better. She'd found another piece from her father's old IA file, a sealed envelope hidden behind a false panel in the cabin wall. Inside, a voice recording on tape. She had to buy a used tape recorder to play it. She waited until night, pressed play. Roosevelt's voice came through, younger, shaky. "I dream of drowning, but it's peaceful, like returning home." Then silence. Then another voice, same mouth, different man. "You can't cure what I am." Then static. Chase paused the tape, rewound it, played it again and again and again. The same transformation, the same cold shift mid-sentence. "You can't cure what I am." Was it mental illness? Dissociation? Something worse? And why had her father hidden this? Back at the precinct, Roosevelt was spiraling. He requested time off. Stress leave. No one questioned it. He looked like hell. He didn't tell anyone that his hands had begun shaking, that his dreams had turned clearer, that the women in them began whispering his name, not in fear, in recognition. He went back to the first crime scene, alone, stared at the river like it held answers. He spoke aloud. "Tell me what I did." No reply, only the wind, only a reflection in the water, smiling back at him. Chase got a call that night, another body, victim number 9. Male, mid-40s, found in the elevator shaft of an abandoned hotel downtown, strangled, red lips, nylon cord, lily. The pattern held, but this time there was something new. A page torn from a book tucked in the man's coat. A single passage underlined in ink. "We become what we bury." She took the page to a contact in the university archives. It was from a first edition psychology text. The same book that had been flagged in her father's closed IA file, listed under Exhibit D, Roosevelt Burke's personal items. Later that night, Chase visited Roosevelt's apartment. She didn't tell him she was coming. He opened the door in a daze, shirt unbuttoned, eyes sunken. He smelled like whiskey and river water. "I'm not sure who I am anymore," he whispered. Chase stood in the doorway, torn, between empathy and evidence. "You're not alone," she said, and she meant it, but not in the way he thought. She stepped inside, sat across from him, watched his eyes, listened to the voice beneath his voice. Then she asked, "Do you ever feel like something's watching you from inside?" Roosevelt flinched, only once, but enough. Chase smiled gently, and that's when she made the decision. She would not bring this to the department, not yet, not until she was sure. So she did something desperate. She planted a bug in his apartment. That night, she listened from her car. Static, footsteps, silence. Then at 3:17 a.m., Roosevelt speaking. But the voice that followed, not his. Colder, confident, precise. "She's clever, but she'll be mine too. She has to be, to complete the garden." Chase dropped her coffee. Her hands trembled, because now she knew something was living inside Roosevelt Burke. and it was planning something final. End of episode 8. Season 1, episode 9, The Mirror Room. It was raining again. Columbus always seemed to weep before the next body appeared, like the sky knew something no one else dared admit. And somewhere inside an apartment off 5th and Parsons, Roosevelt Burke stood in front of a mirror that didn't show him what he expected. It was subtle at first. The reflection blinked, slower than he did, tilted its head when he didn't, and smiled just as he turned away. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were bruised by sleep debt, his voice ragged from arguing with no one, or someone only he could hear. "She's watching you now," the voice whispered from inside the glass. "She knows." 3 floors below, parked across the street in a car fogged by her own breath, Chase Whelan listened to the bug she planted 6 nights ago. Tonight there was humming, a low, tuneless melody. It sounded like a lullaby sung to something asleep or dying. Then came Roosevelt's voice, calm, deliberate. "I'm ready to remember." She sat up straight, the tape hissed, and then, "Show me what I've done." Roosevelt had begun keeping a journal. He didn't remember writing in it, but there it was. Pages scrawled in handwriting that looked like his, only sharper, angrier. Some entries were in second person, others in verse, and some were written entirely backward. One page caught his eye. The 9th flower wasn't for them, it was for her. "She's the last door I must close." He stared at it until the words swam. The 9th flower, the man in the elevator shaft, the torn book page, Chase. Chase went to Jonas again. Her uncle met her with bloodshot eyes and the same question he always asked now. "You sure it's him?" She didn't answer. She placed the audio recorder on the table, pressed play, waited. Roosevelt's voice again, low, distant. "You buried me, and I grew back stronger." Jonas looked sick. "That ain't the Burke I remember." "I don't think it's Burke at all," Chase said. Then, reluctantly, "I think it's someone inside him." Jonas pulled a faded folder from a locked drawer. He'd been sitting on it for 20 years, an old psychiatric file. Name, Roosevelt L. Burke. Date, March 23, 2005. Subject transferred from county detention to observation. Cause, dissociative episode, blackout, self-harm. Claims of external voice influence. Case dismissed, no further action. On the last page, a single phrase circled in red ink. Patient does not recall the acts committed, but dreams them nightly. Chase went cold. She checked the date. It was 1 week before the first Lily case from '07. Burke had been under observation, then reassigned to active duty, buried, forgotten, unhealed. That night, Roosevelt returned to the place he feared most, the mirror room. Not literal mirrors, not anymore. It was an old condemned art installation once used by local experimental therapists, hundreds of warped panels suspended in a soundproof chamber. People went in to face themselves. Burke had gone once, when he was 16. Back when the dreams first started, back when the voice was only a whisper. Now it roared. He stepped through the broken entrance, flicked on his flashlight. The beams fractured instantly, bouncing from mirror to mirror, scattering his image into 100 warped reflections, each one grinning. "You brought me here," the voice said. "Now remember why." Chase followed the GPS ping from Roosevelt's cruiser. It led her to the same address, the mirror room. She stepped inside without backup, and the moment she crossed the threshold, her reflection fractured too. Dozens of her, watching herself, all slightly off. She heard movement ahead. "Burke?" she called. No response, only footsteps and humming. Then she saw him, at the center, standing still, arms at his side. "Roosevelt," she whispered. "Are you—" He turned slowly, and it wasn't Burke's eyes staring back. It was something older, something colder, like the river come alive, like a storm in a man's skin. "You shouldn't have followed," he said, voice thick with duality. "He tried to protect you." Chase drew her weapon. "You're not him." "No," the thing inside Roosevelt replied, "but I was always his." The mirrors shook, glass cracked, the humming stopped, and Roosevelt collapsed, unconscious, bleeding from the nose, eyes flickering rapidly beneath shut lids. Chase ran to him, dropped to her knees, checked his pulse, still alive, still fighting, but something had broken. Something was loose now, and it had a face, her own. In the mirror behind her, her reflection blinked, then smiled. Season 1, Episode 10, The Borrowed Room. He awoke to silence, no sirens, no river, no voice, just the gentle hum of electricity and the smell of bleach and bandages. Roosevelt Burke blinked slowly, disoriented. The lights above were too white, too perfect, hospital lights. But he wasn't in a hospital bed, no heart monitor, no IV. He was lying on an old mattress in a room painted the color of dust. The furniture was mismatched, the windows were boarded. The door was locked from the outside. This wasn't a hospital, this was a cage. He sat up, groaning. His head throbbed. His shirt was damp with sweat and blood. Someone had dressed his wounds. On the nightstand, a note written in neat handwriting. "You're safe, for now. You were never supposed to wake up this early. Stay here, I'll explain everything." It wasn't signed, but he knew the handwriting. It was his. Only, he hadn't written it. Across town, Chase Whelan stood in her own borrowed room, an office hidden beneath the university library where her father once kept files the department was never meant to see. She had broken the lock 3 hours ago. Now she stood among boxes of truths, newspaper clippings from the early 90s, psychological evaluations, evidence bags, photos. One name kept surfacing. Elijah M. Rowe, a cult leader, psychologist turned predator, obsessed with duality, conscious shadow theory. Identity transference, suspected in at least 9 disappearances, never convicted, disappeared himself in 1999. But in the center of one particularly yellowed folder, she found something that made her knees weaken. A group photo. Children, maybe 8 or 9 of them, all seated in a circle, all with vacant stares. And in the back row, unmistakable, a young Roosevelt Burke, staring directly at the camera. And next to him, Elijah Rowe, hand on his shoulder, smiling. Back in the locked room, Roosevelt dug through the drawers. No phone, no wallet, no badge. But he found another note, taped inside the mirror above the dresser. Written in the same handwriting, "You buried the first truth in 2005. Now it's trying to bloom again. Let it." He grabbed the edge of the dresser and squeezed until the wood creaked. Something was crawling up the back of his mind, a memory trying to surface. A girl's voice. Laughter. Then silence. A red room. Water on the floor, his hands shaking, a lily in her hair. "No," he whispered, pressing his palms to his head. The door clicked, opened slowly, and in stepped a woman in a gray hoodie, sunglasses covering half her face. She locked the door behind her. Roosevelt took a step back. "Who are you?" She didn't answer, just pulled off the glasses. And Chase saw her, Sabrina Gaines, victim number 4, or so everyone believed, the one with the safety pin and the message, "I see you in me." She wasn't dead, she was alive. "I tried to warn you," she said, stepping closer. "You're not chasing a killer." Roosevelt stared, breathless. "Then what am I chasing?" Sabrina looked up, eyes glassy. "A memory you carved into someone else." Meanwhile, Chase found her way to an old storage facility where Rowe once held sessions for his followers. The building had been condemned for years, but she'd found blueprints in her father's files. There was a lower level, a hidden basement. And etched into the concrete near the entrance, barely visible in the flashlight beam, were 5 words, "I see you in me." She descended, dust curled in the light. And when she reached the final step, she found it, what she was never meant to see. The original mirror room, cracked panels, an altar of wilted lilies, names carved into the walls, including hers, including Burke's, and beneath his name, "Returned." Back in the safe house, Sabrina held up a tape recorder. She pressed play. And Roosevelt heard his own voice again. Only this time it wasn't a confession. It was a conversation between himself and someone who sounded like him, but wasn't. Roosevelt 1. "You promised it was over. I lied. You can't keep doing this. You made me. I'm your gift to the world. I'm what keeps it clean." Roosevelt Burke dropped the tape player, backed into the wall, eyes wide. Sabrina looked at him, not with fear, but with deep, exhausted sadness. "You're not the killer, Roosevelt," she whispered. "Then who is?" She stepped closer, resting a hand on his chest. "You are the garden." She looked into his eyes, and he is what blooms inside it. Season 1, Episode 11, Beneath the Garden. Roosevelt didn't sleep. Not that night. Not in that room where the shadows whispered, where the light from the broken window kept flickering as if the past were trying to crawl back through. Sabrina sat across from him, arms wrapped around herself, trembling with memory or fear. He couldn't tell. "You said I wasn't the killer," he finally said. voice hollow. But then who is? She didn't look at him when she answered. You are, she whispered. But not the you sitting here. Meanwhile, Chase moved deeper into the hidden floor of the old storage facility, her flashlight beam trembling over the walls. The names were everywhere, hundreds of them. Some scratched over, others underlined in red chalk. And then she saw it again. His, Roosevelt Elijah Burke. There was something scrawled beneath it, barely visible beneath the dust and mold. Host confirmed. The temperature dropped. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed, though there were no open doors. She should have turned back, called for backup. But something about this place, it had gravity, and gravity doesn't let go. Sabrina poured tea into cracked mugs, fingers shaking. I remember you before you were him, she said softly. Roosevelt frowned. Before who? I don't think you ever gave him a name, she said. He doesn't need one, but he has yours now. He laughed bitterly. Are you saying I have a split personality? Sabrina stared at him, solemn. I'm saying someone else lives in your house. And then she reached into her coat and pulled out a photograph. Faded, water-damaged. It showed a basement, mirrors everywhere. In the middle of the room was a boy, maybe 11, kneeling, covered in blood. His reflection was smiling, but the boy wasn't. That's the day he chose you, she said. At the Columbus precinct, Chase reviewed the records in her private office, piecing together the timeline. Every murder, every clue, every note, every anomaly. There were patterns. They curved like vines. But the roots, they led back before the first body. Back to an old, unsolved fire at a foster home on the east side. 1995. Only one survivor. A child found locked in the basement, covered in blood, fingerprints smeared across a wall of mirrors. Name, Roosevelt Burke. Roosevelt stood in the bathroom now, staring at himself in the cracked mirror. He ran cold water over his hands. When he looked up again, his reflection was smiling. But he wasn't. He took a step back, trembling. What do you want from me? He whispered. His reflection tilted its head, amused. I want to finish what you started. Chase sat in her car now, heart racing. She stared at the files in her lap. Everything was leading to one impossible conclusion. But it was just that, impossible. Roosevelt wasn't a killer. He wasn't capable of this. She thought about his silences, his migraines, the strange blackouts, the lipstick, the lilies, the way he always arrived first to the scene. No, there had to be another explanation. She turned the key in the ignition. She had to confront him, face to face, even if it meant confronting the truth. Sabrina opened the closet door. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, each labeled in neat handwriting, each with a date and a name, victims' names. Some were recent, some dated back over 20 years, all of them organized, stored, like trophies. Where did these come from? Roosevelt asked, barely able to breathe. She didn't answer. He pulled out the box labeled Klein Jada. Inside, a charcoal drawing, a bracelet, a single nylon cord, and beneath it all, a small cassette tape, labeled simply Voice Practice Number 4. He played it, and this time it was just one voice, his own, singing, softly, sweetly, a lullaby, words in no language, but the tone was not his. Chase arrived at the house. It was dark, boarded, but not empty. She stepped inside, weapon drawn. She called out his name. Once, twice, no answer. But in the hallway, she found something etched into the wall, a crude drawing, a lily blooming inside a skull, and below it, the garden is awake. Roosevelt fell to his knees, shaking. Sabrina knelt beside him, touching his face gently. I stayed alive to tell you, she whispered, because he'll come again, and this time, he'll wear your skin like it's always fit. Roosevelt looked up, eyes wide, and whispered, How do I stop him? Sabrina leaned closer. You don't. You remember him. In the mirror, the reflection laughed. Not loud, just a quiet, knowing chuckle, like someone had just won a game that no one else knew had even started. End of episode 11. Season 1, episode 12, The Mirror Room. The door creaked open slowly. Roosevelt stepped inside the abandoned building on 5th and Whittier, once a juvenile behavioral center, burned in '95, condemned ever since. But he remembered it. The shape of the hallways, the stale scent of ammonia soaked into the concrete, the humming, soft and steady, a song without words. It came from beneath, from the basement, from there. Chase parked 3 blocks away, gun tucked beneath her jacket. She didn't call for backup. Not yet. Something told her this wasn't the kind of confrontation you share with the department. She had read the fire report 10 times. Roosevelt Burke, age 11, found in the basement, no parents, no record before that day, just a boy with blood under his nails and mirrors shattered around him. The attending officer wrote one sentence in the margins of the report. The boy kept laughing, but he never blinked. The basement stairs groaned under Roosevelt's weight. He held a flashlight, though the bulb flickered like it didn't want to reveal what waited below. Every step was a memory returning. The air thickened, cold, wrong. Then the room appeared. At the bottom of the stairs, behind a warped door, the mirror room, still intact, a dozen tall, standing mirrors, rimmed in rust, cracked and tilting, and in the center, an old wooden chair, empty, waiting. He stepped inside. The flashlight flickered again, then died. He stood in darkness, surrounded by his own reflections, but not all of them moved when he did. One stayed perfectly still, smiling. Chase entered the building, her boots kicking dust up like smoke. She followed the whisper of a voice, Roosevelt's voice, murmuring to someone or to himself. She descended into the dark, her flashlight revealing handprints along the stairwell wall. Small ones, bloody, decades old. She called his name once. The whispering stopped. Roosevelt stared at the mirror that didn't match. His reflection tilted its head. He didn't. "You left me," it said. "I was a child. You still are." He stepped closer. "What are you?" "I'm the part you gave away so you wouldn't feel. The one you locked in this room. You're not real." The reflection smiled wider. "Neither are you." The mirrors began to tremble. He looked around. Every image of himself was different. One grinning, one weeping, one screaming silently, but all watching. "You killed them," Roosevelt said to the mirror. "You wore me to do it." "I showed you the garden," the reflection replied. "I watered it." Chase reached the basement. She saw him standing in the center of a circle of mirrors. Frozen, eyes wide, he didn't blink. She called to him. He didn't move. Then one of the mirrors cracked by itself, then another, and another, until the room echoed with sharp, screaming glass. Roosevelt fell to his knees. Blood trickled from his nose. The voices screamed in his mind, layered over one another, but his voice was missing. His own thoughts drowned beneath them. One whisper grew louder than the rest. "The garden grows when you're not looking." And then he remembered. The first lily, the red ribbon, the fire, the child in the chair, the laughter that wasn't his. He had buried something, and it had grown. Chase reached him just as the mirrors stopped shattering. Roosevelt looked up, tears in his eyes. "I remember," he said. "God help me, I remember him." "Who?" He touched his chest. "Me." Then he passed out. Back at the station, Chase filed the discovery of the mirror room as evidence of trauma recovery. She didn't tell anyone about the mirrors moving on their own, or about the voice she thought she heard just before they shattered. A whisper that had not belonged to Roosevelt, a whisper that had said, "She's next." In a quiet part of the city, a woman walked home late. A breeze passed. She paused, something behind her, a scent, lilies. She turned around. No one, but in her purse somehow was a folded note she hadn't put there. It read, "The Garden Remembers." End of episode 12. Season 1, episode 13, The Bloom. They buried the fourth victim 2 days before the rain came. The lilies on the casket were real this time. No nylon cord, no red lips, no note, just grief. And Roosevelt Burke standing in the back dressed in black, holding a prayer card so tightly the edges cut into his palm. He didn't cry, he didn't speak, he didn't blink. Chase was watching from across the lawn. Not him, his hands, they didn't shake. No tremble, no nervous twitch. But she'd seen the video footage from the storage unit, the timestamp from 2 nights before the third murder. There he was, Roosevelt Burke, carrying a box, gloves on, blank-faced. A camera caught him entering, but none caught him leaving. That night, Roosevelt sat alone in his apartment. Sabrina hadn't called in days. The pills from Dr. Hendricks sat unopened on the table. He stared at them like they might explode. The TV was on, but silent. Static on every channel. He didn't remember turning it on, didn't remember what day it was, only that something inside him had woken up, something that didn't like to sleep anymore. The next body was found in the conservatory garden behind the Franklin Park greenhouse. This time, a man, age 42, an environmental scientist, strangled, red lipstick smeared across his lips, hands folded over his chest, and a lily blooming inside his mouth. A gardener found him just before dawn. Chase arrived first, Roosevelt second. He said nothing at first, just stared at the lily protruding from between the victim's teeth. The bloom was fresh, too fresh, like it had just been fed. Later, back at the precinct, Chase sat across from him. She asked him the same question she'd asked 10 times before. "Where were you last night between 2 and 4 a.m.? Roosevelt blinked slowly. "I don't know." "You don't know?" "I sleep, or I try to." Chase leaned forward. "Try harder, Burke, because you're starting to look like the storm, not the shelter." He looked away, but inside the storm had already started. Sabrina finally returned his call, but she didn't say hello. She said, "He's not hiding anymore." Roosevelt's knuckles went white. "Then tell me what to do." "You already know, you just don't want to do it." "I'm not a killer." "Not all the time." She hung up. That night, Roosevelt dreamed of the garden again. Not a metaphor, a real place. Endless rows of graves covered in lilies, red ribbons tied around each headstone. A shadow walked through it barefoot. It had his shape, but none of his kindness. When it turned to look at him, its eyes were mirrors, and in them, Roosevelt saw every victim's final breath. Chase broke into his apartment that morning. No warrant, just instinct. She found the second bedroom, the one he never talked about. Inside, dozens of lilies pressed into old books, red lipstick stacked in the closet, an old voice recorder with 7 files. She played the first. It was Roosevelt, laughing, but the laugh wasn't his. Roosevelt sat outside the conservatory that night, flashlight in hand. He returned to the place of the last body. He didn't know what he was looking for until he saw the initials carved into the tree. R.E.B. Below it, newer scratches. Woke up here, again. He touched the bark, and for a moment, he remembered choking someone. His hands, tight, steady, a woman's mouth, red, her last breath, not a scream, a whisper. Why? And he had answered because he said it's time to bloom. Back at the precinct, Chase listened to the last file on the recorder. There was silence. Then, a voice, low, confident, not Roosevelt, but inside Roosevelt. "She's too close. I'll take care of her." The voice chuckled. "You'll thank me for it." Chase didn't sleep that night. She cleaned her gun, prosody. Checked the locks. Watched the sunrise like it might be her last. Because she finally understood, Roosevelt Burke wasn't the killer. Not exactly, but he was the vessel, and the thing blooming inside him was almost done growing. Season 1, Episode 14, The Vessel. Roosevelt Burke awoke to the sound of his own breathing, heavy, measured, like something inside him was counting each inhale. He sat up in bed, sweating, fists clenched. His knuckles were bleeding again. He didn't know why. Across town, Chase stared at the voice recorder like it might start speaking on its own. The voice, his voice but not his voice, echoed in her ears. "You'll thank me for it." She had heard killers lie. She had heard them beg. But this one smiled through the wire, like he already knew she was listening. She reached for her phone and dialed Dr. Hendricks. Voicemail. Again. "Call me back. It's about Roosevelt. He's not well, and he's not alone." She hung up, paused, then called Internal Affairs, and hung up before the first ring. She wasn't ready, not yet. Roosevelt sat in the interrogation room, not as a suspect yet. He'd asked Chase to bring him there. Said he needed silence, said he needed to talk. The camera blinked red above him. He stared directly into it and whispered, "Tell her not to follow me." Then smiled. The smile didn't belong to him. Chase didn't get the message until morning. By then, Roosevelt had disappeared. Badge on the desk, gun missing. In the voice recorder's final audio file, she heard something new. A location, a single word. Sycamore. She found it that afternoon. Sycamore Preserve, overgrown, forgotten. A patch of forest on the edge of the city. Local teens said it was haunted. She parked near the rusted gate and entered on foot. The trees closed around her like ribs. The air smelled like moss and memory. She found the first lily 10 minutes in, then another and another, each one leading her deeper, until she found the chapel. It leaned to one side, nearly swallowed by ivy. The stained glass had long since shattered, but in the mossy pews were candles, burning. And at the altar, Roosevelt Burke, kneeling, eyes closed, mouth moving, not in prayer, in dialogue. Chase stepped forward, gun drawn. Roosevelt. He didn't flinch. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said. Still no movement. "I know what's happening. I know about the voice. I know it's real." That got his attention. His eyes opened, slowly, but something else looked out. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "Then tell me to leave." He smiled again. Too wide, too clean. "The vessel doesn't get to make decisions. Not anymore." Chase's grip on her weapon tightened. "What is it?" she asked. "This thing inside you?" Roosevelt's lips trembled. "It's not inside, Chase. It's what's left of me. Everything I buried in that basement, everything I tried to forget." He stood. The child who watched his mother drown, the boy who laughed in the fire, the man who built a mask of decency and wore it until it fit. Chase stepped closer. "And the killer?" Roosevelt blinked. "The killer's just the gardener." The wind blew hard, snapping through the broken windows. Candles flickered, the lilies trembled. Roosevelt turned toward her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness." "Then what are you asking for?" He looked down at his hands. "They're not mine anymore." And then he lunged. The gun went off once, not at him, at the ceiling. A warning. Roosevelt froze mid-step, panting. Chase didn't move. She lowered the gun slowly. "I'm not going to shoot you, Burke, but you have to come with me, right now, before it takes full control." Roosevelt's jaw clenched, tears welled but never fell. "I don't know if I can leave." "Then let me walk with you." They left the chapel together, no cuffs, no words, just the sound of the woods behind them, whispering, like someone, or something, was saying goodbye, or maybe just waiting for nightfall. That night, Chase logged the day's report as an off-duty call. No mention of the gun, no mention of the chapel, no mention of what Roosevelt said. But in her notes, on the last line, she wrote, "The vessel is cracking." Somewhere in Columbus, a new lily blooms in a glass jar. A man in a long coat hums a tune only Roosevelt remembers. And the next name on the list is written in red, Chase Whelan. Season 1, Episode 15, Through the Fog. Columbus wore a mask of fog that morning. Thick, heavy, almost theatrical. The city moved slower, as if it too was holding its breath. Chase stood at her window, watching headlights slice through the mist like knives. In her hands, the recorder still sat like a loaded weapon. File 008. Unlabeled, unplayed. Her thumb hovered over play for a long time. Then, she pressed it. Roosevelt's voice crackled through the speaker. Tired, flat, honest in the way that men only are when they believe no one is listening. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm already gone." She stopped breathing. "I've been waking up with blood under my nails, but no wounds on my skin, dreams of rivers that whisper, a woman with no face who tells me I'm not done blooming. I think there's something wrong with me, Chase, or maybe something right with him. I don't know the difference anymore." There was a pause. Then, "He has my memories, my voice, but not my guilt. That's how I know he's real." The message ended, and Chase knew exactly what she had to do. She returned to the basement beneath Roosevelt's building, the second bedroom, the one with the pressed lilies, the ritual candles, the walls lined with pages from missing person reports, all pinned in order, chronological, like a scrapbook of someone's descent or someone's masterpiece. In the closet, she found a shoebox labeled Mayfield. Inside, childhood drawings, a boy with hollow eyes, a woman drowning, a man made of red scribbles with lilies for teeth. In one picture, the boy had written one word at the top in red crayon, me. Back at the precinct, Chase requested every file connected to the name Mayfield. It wasn't an alias Roosevelt ever used, but it was the name of a foster home. Franklin Mayfield Home for Boys, closed in 1992, burned in an accidental fire. No survivors listed, but one boy was never claimed. No name, just a note. Found walking alone in the woods, age estimated 7, mute, carried a lily in his hand. Case closed. Burke's birthday, March 13th, 1992. Exactly 2 weeks after the fire, she ran her fingers through her hair, connecting dots that had no right to touch. Roosevelt wasn't born, he was created. Later that night, Roosevelt stood at the banks of the Olentangy River, staring into the fog. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Not because he couldn't, because someone else did the dreaming now. Behind his eyes, there were people screaming, faces melting into petals, Water rising, always rising, and a voice. She knows. He closed his eyes. I know. Then do something about it. Chase pulled into the parking lot behind the station. Her gut told her not to go inside. But instincts were messy things. They don't listen to logic. She reached for her badge, then saw the note under her windshield wiper. You'll never catch him. He's already inside. No signature, no handwriting, just typewritten words, like the last victims, like all of them. She didn't go inside. She drove straight to Roosevelt's apartment, and he was waiting for her. He didn't smile, didn't blink. Come in, he said. Chase stepped over the threshold like it was a cliff's edge. The apartment was clean, too clean, like someone had erased a crime or a memory. You know, don't you, he asked. I don't know what I know anymore. That's how it starts, he whispered. Doubt. It gets in your bones. Chase reached for her recorder, pressed play on file 009. Another voice, this time not his, not hers, just static. And then, the bloom is complete. She looked up. Roosevelt's eyes were glassy, his pupils dilated, and then they rolled back. He collapsed, convulsing, mouth foaming. Chase dropped to her knees, shouting his name. No response. Only a whisper from his lips, not his voice, but the other one. I'm here now, and you, Chase Whelan, are the final seed. He passed out, heartbeat faint. She called an ambulance and sat beside him on the cold floor, holding his hand, not sure if she was comforting him or keeping him from becoming something else. Outside, the fog began to clear, but inside Roosevelt Burke, something darker was just beginning to rise. Season 1, Episode 16, The Forgotten Name. The fog had lifted, but the weight in the air remained. Hospitals are strange places after midnight, where heart monitors sound like ticking clocks and shadows move like they're waiting to be remembered. Room 308 was quiet, except for the faint rasp of breath through Detective Roosevelt Burke's cracked lips. He hadn't woken in 2 days, not fully. He'd muttered names in his sleep, names that didn't exist, names that matched no victims, no suspects, names only the dead might know. Chase sat at his bedside, fingers laced tight around a worn notepad. Every whisper he'd made she wrote down, every phrase, every twitch, every flicker of something that might help her put the pieces together before another Lily showed up somewhere in Columbus. But she was too late, because this time, the Lily didn't come with a body. It came with a head. Doctor. Elaine Hendricks, Roosevelt's therapist, was found in her office chair that morning. Eyes wide, lips painted red, no blood, no wounds, just her severed head placed gently on her desk, a single white lily tucked into her gray curls. On the wall behind her, something new, not typed, not neat. Scrawled in red marker, the doctor knew my name. Chase didn't cry. She drove straight to the archive storage under the precinct, bypassed the records clerk with a fake smile, and pulled the oldest boxes marked Foster System, Columbus, 1992. Inside, she found what she didn't know she was looking for, a manila envelope with water stains and fingerprints baked into the paper. Label, unclaimed minor, recovered from Mayfield fire site, March 13, 1992. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. A single page. Patient intake summary, child psychiatric ward, St. Gabriel's, name, unknown. Estimated age, 7. Notes, nonverbal. Severe trauma, refuses to answer to any name. Repeated behavior, draws white flowers, mumbles me repeatedly when alone. Recommendation, intensive care, identity formation disrupted, potential for dissociative episodes. Temporary name assigned, Roosevelt Burke. The page slipped from her hand. She whispered it aloud like a ghost story. Roosevelt Burke is not his name. He was given that name. She returned to the hospital. He was sitting up now, awake, but staring at the wall like it had answers. You killed her, she said. No, he replied calmly. He did. And who is he, Roosevelt? His jaw twitched. I think he's the real one. She stepped closer. What was your name before they gave you this one? Silence. Then a whisper. I don't know. I don't think I had one. I think I wasn't anyone until he gave me one. Who gave it to you? His eyes met hers, and for a moment they weren't his. They were someone else's, older, colder. Dr. Elias Crane, he said. He ran the Mayfield home. He liked naming things. That name had been buried for decades. Dr. Elias Crane, thought dead in the Mayfield fire, the man who oversaw 37 children, the man who was accused in sealed court records of ritualistic abuse, though nothing was ever proven. All charges dismissed, all witnesses lost in the blaze. All except one. Chase drove to the ruins of the old Mayfield property that night. The foundation was still there, covered in moss and cracked concrete. She brought a flashlight and a loaded pistol. She didn't know what she expected to find, but what she found was a cellar, locked, rusted shut, hidden under a false floor in what used to be the chapel. She pried it open. Inside, bones, dozens of them, tiny, lined like a graveyard nursery. At the far end, a small cot, burnt but intact, and on the wall, drawn in soot and blood, "He made me bloom." Back at the hospital, Roosevelt was screaming. Nurses had sedated him twice already. He kept trying to tear something from his chest. Screaming about petals, about roots in his lungs, about voices that had no mouths. Chase stood in the doorway and watched, then pulled out her recorder and whispered, "Case file, Roosevelt Burke. I don't think the killer is a man, not anymore. I think the killer is a fracture, a ghost made of memory and rage, planted in the mind of a boy who never had a name. And now, that ghost is blooming." In the final scene, Roosevelt stares at his reflection in the dark window. The lights behind him flicker, and just as his own face vanishes into shadow, another one replaces it. Not older, not younger, just wrong, and smiling. End of episode 16. Season 1, episode 17, The Man Who Wasn't There. The girl had survived the fire, but no one remembered her name. For 30 years, she lived in the corners of Columbus, moving between halfway houses, shelters, and finally silence. Her records were sealed, her case buried. She had never spoken of what happened in Mayfield. Not to police, not to therapists, not even to herself. Until now. Chase found her through the fire department archives, buried under cross-referenced reports and a single scribbled note. Possible witness, female, age 9, listed under alias Mara. The address was a women's shelter on the south side, room 9. She was older now, skin like paper and hair buzzed short. But her eyes, those eyes still held smoke. When Chase showed her the picture of Roosevelt Burke, Mara flinched like she'd been struck. "No," she whispered. "You don't find him. He finds you." "You know him?" Chase asked gently. "I knew one of him," Mara said, voice trembling. "But there were more." Chase's hand froze. "What do you mean?" Mara's eyes didn't blink. "I mean there was the boy, the one who didn't speak, the one who cried lilies." "Lilies?" Mara nodded, her face hollowing. "They grew where he sat, in the ash. I don't care if you believe me. He drew them with his fingers, over and over, even when there was no paper, even when there was no light." Back at the station, Chase pulled open her board again. Victim names, times, locations, all connected by time of death, dawn. Roosevelt still hadn't been discharged from the hospital. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified, because while he was there, no one had died. She returned to the hospital at 3:03 a.m. The halls were quiet, but room 308 was empty. She bolted to the nurses' station. They hadn't seen him leave. Security footage? Gone. Erased. Like he had never been admitted. Chase called dispatch. "Any bodies?" she asked. Silence. Then, "Yeah, one. About 10 minutes ago. A nurse, south side." "Name?" The dispatcher hesitated. Her name was Mara. The scene was different this time. There was no lily, no lipstick, just a single name carved into her arm. Crane. Chase didn't go back to the station. She went to the one person left who might know what was happening. A retired detective named Ellis Keene, lead investigator on the Mayfield fire, now blind and living alone. She found him surrounded by dusty files, half blind and talking to the television. "He's awake," he said before she even introduced herself. "Who?" she asked. "The one they let sleep too long." She showed him Roosevelt's picture. Keene smiled, sadly. "No, not him. That's the face he wears, not the one he owns." Chase leaned forward. "Who was Roosevelt before he was Roosevelt?" Keene's voice went low. "We never found a name, but there were rumors. One of the kids in the home, he had a gift, not like normal kids, more like a fracture, like a broken mirror that learned to walk." On the way home, Chase couldn't stop shaking, not because of what she'd heard, but because of what she saw. In her rearview mirror. A figure, not quite Roosevelt, not quite someone else, but watching, not blinking, not moving, like a reflection that didn't belong to the car. At 4:44 a.m., Chase entered her apartment, locked every door. She placed her gun on the table, then noticed something. A white lily in her sink, still wet, still fresh, and beneath it, a single torn scrap of an old photograph. half of a boy's face, no eyes, just a faint smile. On the back, handwritten in a child's hand, "I remember who I am now." End of episode 17. Season 1, episode 18. Painted in red, Chase didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Not after finding the lily in her sink. Not after hearing the soft thud of her locked bedroom door rattle, just once, as if something had touched it from the other side. The photo scrap was still on her table. The boy's smile was starting to look different the longer she stared at it. Sharper, knowing. "I remember who I am now." She played the phrase over and over. The handwriting looked like a child's, but something in the curve of the letters, it was methodical, adult, intentional, like someone pretending not to know how to write. At 9:03 a.m., 3 bodies were found at the Franklin Park Conservatory. The display was grotesque and deliberate. Each victim was dressed in red, from head to toe. Red dresses, red shoes, red painted fingernails. Their lips had been sewn shut with red thread, and a thick ring of red lilies surrounded them in perfect symmetry. There were no wounds, no blood, just perfection. A message was pinned to the center body, typed, bold, "Not a murder, a mural." Chase stood behind the crime scene tape, staring at the bloodless bodies while wind caught her coat. A mural, not a murder. That phrase made her feel sick. Roosevelt, if it was still him, was creating a gallery, not just killing, but curating. Like each victim was a brushstroke in a picture no one could fully see. Until now. Back at headquarters, Chase sat in the dark. She pinned photos across the board, every victim, every pose, every location. She realized something that made her stomach lurch. The bodies formed a pattern. Each crime scene, each lily left behind, was a point, a radius, a petal. And at the center of all of them, an abandoned art museum, the Darwin Institute of Expression. It had closed 10 years ago after a fire ruined the West Wing. At 2:17 a.m., she entered through the side door. The scent of mold and rust filled her lungs. Her flashlight swept across cracked marble statues and shredded canvases. Then she heard it, humming, soft, childlike, coming from the gallery floor. She followed it. The room was cold, darker than the rest. And then she saw him, Roosevelt, standing still, facing a giant canvas, alone. He was painting. In red. She raised her gun. "Turn around." He didn't. "Roosevelt, it's me. Chase." He dipped the brush into the red again. "It's not paint," he said softly. She felt the hairs on her neck rise. "What?" "It's memory, dried, mixed with truth. I'm just helping it come back." He finally turned. His eyes were glassed over, not vacant, inhabited, but not by Roosevelt. Someone else wore his face. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm what was left behind when they tried to kill the truth." Then he lifted the canvas. It was unfinished, a face, not Roosevelt's, not hers. A third face, neutral, hollow-eyed, ageless. She stepped back, because the brushstrokes that formed the cheekbones, they were written names. Every victim, layered into a face, a mural made of the dead. Chase dropped her flashlight, and in that final flicker before the darkness swallowed the room, she saw it, her name, painted in red, beneath the left eye. Season 1, episode 19. The mirror room. Chase didn't file a report. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't lead to padded walls and psych evals. Nothing that made sense in daylight. She'd seen Roosevelt, or someone wearing him, paint with what looked like blood. She'd seen her own name woven into the canvas of a killer's masterpiece. And now, she couldn't stop hearing the humming. Everywhere. Like something had followed her out of the Darwin Institute. Something still painting. She traced Roosevelt's old case files, hoping for a thread. Instead, she found an address, scribbled in the margins of a report from 6 years ago. The handwriting didn't match Roosevelt's usual scrawl. It was neat, precise, almost childlike. The mirror room. Come see what's left. The address led her to a forgotten industrial block on the west end of Columbus, a condemned warehouse behind 2 boarded-up buildings. The front door had no lock, just a handle, waiting. Inside, it smelled of iron and mildew. A soft hum vibrated through the floor, like something mechanical, alive. She moved cautiously, gun drawn. Every room was empty, until she found the hallway of mirrors. A long, narrow corridor with cracked glass lining both sides, full-length mirrors, some shattered at strange angles, some fogged over. They reflected her differently in each one. In one, older, in another, younger. In one, bleeding. And in the last mirror at the end of the corridor, Roosevelt stood beside her. She spun around. No one. The mirror was lying, or showing the truth. There was a door beside the final mirror. Inside, recordings, a wall of them, cassette tapes, hundreds, each labeled with dates, some as far back as 1992, some dated next week. She slid one into the player. The label read, Voice 2, March 3rd, 4:44 a.m. The tape hissed. Then came a voice. Roosevelt's, low, calm, detached. You don't remember what they did in Mayfield, do you? You've made yourself forget that was the deal. A second voice, also Roosevelt, but broken, fragile. I didn't want to hurt them. No, but I did. That's the difference between us. Why now? Why again? Because the mirror cracked, and when it did, you let me out. Static, then humming. Chase dropped the tape. She stumbled back into the corridor of mirrors. Her reflection twisted again. In one, Roosevelt stood behind her. In another, she stood behind herself, but her eyes were dark, empty. She smashed the mirror. Behind it, a crawl space. She climbed through, found a small chamber, an old cot, drawings on the wall, dozens of white lilies carved into the concrete. The word me scratched over and over. In the corner, a journal, child's handwriting, scrawled across the first page. I was born when they burned the others. He screamed so I could live. Chase emerged from the warehouse at dawn. A patrol car sped by. Another body had been found, but she already knew that because she now understood something terrifying. She wasn't chasing a man. She was chasing a fracture, a split of innocence and violence, of memory and madness, of Roosevelt and something else. And now it wasn't hiding anymore. It was inviting her in, because the mural wasn't finished, not yet, and the final stroke would be her. Season 1, Episode 20, The Mural is Alive. Rain soaked the city like it was trying to wash something away, but it was too late. The mural was nearly finished. 15 bodies, 15 lilies, 15 secrets buried in Columbus soil. And now, Chase stood at the center of it all, map unfolded across her apartment floor, crime scenes circled in red, strings connecting them like veins. In the middle, a forgotten church outside Dublin, closed since 1997 after a fire devoured its rectory. She looked at the photo she found in the crawlspace again. A boy, maybe 9 years old, smiling, standing next to a nun with her face scratched out. In the boy's hand was a lily. Chase drove in silence. She had her service weapon, a flashlight, and the journal she'd stolen from the mirror room. The last page still made her hands shake. He doesn't sleep when I do. He dreams for both of us. The church loomed in the fog, hollow-eyed and split down the middle like an open wound. The windows wept black mold, the front doors were chained. She found another way in, the basement, and there it was, the mural. Not painted, built, bones, skulls, torn fabric, hair, laid into the wall like mosaic tiles. The lilies had rotted, browned, and brittle, but they still crowned every face like a saint. She gasped, because she saw her own face, half-finished, marked with a smear of blood across her temple. The final piece. Hello, Chase, she turned. Roosevelt stood in the doorway, unarmed, calm, and his eyes, no longer glassy or lost, they were split, one full of tears, one empty. You don't have to do this, she said, raising her gun. Whatever this is, I can still help you. He stepped forward, hands raised. You're right, you can. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not the one you should fear, he said softly. Then something shifted in him. Not just a facial twitch, a fracture. His voice dropped, lower, colder, the other voice. I was born in the fire, it said. They buried me in his head and prayed he'd never hear me scream. The lights flickered, and Roosevelt smiled. No, it smiled with teeth that belonged to the dark. You're not chasing me, the voice whispered. You're part of me. You always were. That's why you're still alive. The lights went out. Gunfire echoed in the dark. Once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. When the police arrived, they found Chase kneeling at the altar. Roosevelt lay beside her, dead, a smile on his face, a lily in his hand. She clutched the journal to her chest, staring at the mural. Her name was no longer there, but something else was. We are now one. Back at the precinct, Chase handed in her badge. She told them she was done, but when she got home, the humming started again, soft, familiar. In her bathroom mirror, something waited, not a reflection, a whisper. Thank you for letting me in. End of Season 1, Season 2 coming soon.